What's up? My name is Ryan, and I find now that I'm getting older, I'm currently 48 years old, actually very close to 49 now, and I find that as I've been aging, I've been wanting to document my life. Maybe this is some sort of midlife crisis, but over the last couple of years, I've started to document certain areas of my life. Last summer, I created a documentary on my life in cycling and the 20 years plus that I've spent building up my own custom bikes, and just what a passion I've had for cycling over those years. At the end of each year, I make a little edit for skateboarding, including all of my favorite tricks and favorite places I went to that year when I was skateboarding. And music has been an enormous part of my life, off and on, for more than 20 years now. And I thought maybe it's about time that I document not just music, but more specifically the different iterations of studios I've had over the years. I've had a lot, and I think more or less I've settled on sort of the final studio setup that I'll be using. But I want to take a little trip back, just even for myself, and take a look at all the different studios I've had, all the wonderful memories of all the friends that have come and created music with me in those studios, culminating with a tour of my current studio here in February of 2023, along with the physical instruments that I have. So let's take a look back on more than 20 years of music studios in my life. I would say I have a fairly eclectic musical taste. I was raised on music from the 50s and 60s, Johnny Cash, Fats Domino, Little Richard, and especially my dad's favorite band, Creedence Clearwater Revival. These were all staples in my household. Music was always on, and I just loved music growing up. And then as I came into my own in the 80s, so I was definitely a product of the 80s, I started listening to all of the pop songs on the radio, Huey Lewis, Tears for Fears, Cyndi Lauper, you name it. Absolutely loved the whole pop era of the 80s. And then as I got into the late 80s and early 90s, my group of friends started to diversify a bit more, bringing more types of music into my circle, such as, metal like Metallica. I had some friends, older brothers, that got me into Def Leppard, The Clash. So really introducing a lot of bands in different genres I'd never heard of. And to this day, I continue to search out new music. I love every genre, from hip hop to rock to old country. I listen to a lot of different things, and that's really sort of painted my musical tastes and even just the music I produce now. Let's go a little further back though, to when I was 12. So I first started to learn how to play the guitar at 12 years old. My parents signed me up for guitar lessons, and I hated it. I didn't like learning to read music, and the songs that they had me playing back then were very simple songs because they're teaching you to learn how to play music. So I was playing things like Camptown Races and Tom Dooley, and they were terrible. And what I used to do was I had a little cassette recorder, and I would play through the songs one time while recording them, and then I would just sit in my room and read a comic book or something and just play the tape back on loop over and over. So my parents would think that I was practicing, which I wasn't. The jig was up pretty soon, and my parents said, fine, you don't want to play guitar, don't bother. And the guitar was sort of relegated to a closet somewhere, and that was the end of that. Fast forward about 5 or 6 years until the point where I was about 18 going on 19, and a friend of mine introduced me to tablature. And if you don't know what tablature is, it's basically like reading music for dummies. It is a fretboard of a guitar, and it has a number telling you which finger and what fret to put that finger on. And now anybody could learn to play the guitar. You don't have to learn how to read music. You can read tablature, which you can learn in about 30 seconds. And that led to me picking a guitar back up and really getting that bug to play guitar now, because at this point I could pick what I wanted. So I had purchased a number of guitar books, tablature books over the years, and I would go to the store once a month and get all the newest guitar magazines because they would have the most current tablature for the newest songs that were out, so I could learn that stuff. And at this point, I'm really learning, and I've become a master of all things riffs, but I probably couldn't play a single song straight through for maybe another year. Alright, so bring on the 1990s and the birth of grunge, and a person named Kurt Cobain, whose band Nirvana just explodes worldwide. And of course I jump on the train as well because I'm loving this new grunge thing. And as I start to look at tablature for some of Nirvana's songs, I realize these are real basic songs. Like, they're just power chords, they're very simple to learn. Even the solos are just like a solo version of the main melody of the vocals typically, and also very easy to learn. And I realized a couple things from that. Number one, you don't have to be a guitar virtuoso to make good, relevant music. You also don't have to be a great vocalist to put together a really good vocal performance. And number two, this means that pretty much anyone with some passion can become a musician. So I started to learn every Nirvana song I could, which is really what solidified my love of music to this day. And when I get to my instruments, I'll show you that it's still affecting the type of instrument I purpose. And to celebrate, I even have a Kurt Cobain portrait here, because he's the guy that really showed me how to play a guitar. And hidden in here is the music notes for Love Buzz, which was the first Nirvana song that I learned. So now that I'm playing guitar, the next inevitable question becomes, how do I record this stuff? How do I actually make some songs? So first thing I do is I go down to the used record store. It used to be a place, or a used music store. It used to be a place called Rocket Music in St. Catharines, where I'm from. And they just had all kinds of used equipment, from guitars and pedals to recording stuff. And I picked myself up a Tascam 4-track recorder. And this is back when you put a cassette tape in and it would record 2 tracks on one side of the cassette tape, 2 tracks on the other. So not the best sound quality, but this opened up a whole new world to me, because as a solo musician, somebody that didn't really have anybody to play with at that time, I could record a track and then come back and play another track to it. And the fact that I could now set up my own instrumentation just blew my mind, and I dove right into songwriting and making music. Well, that inevitably leads to the next thing that most musicians are going to experience, which is gas. That's gear acquisition syndrome. And of course, after getting the 4-track recorder, the next thing I needed was a drummer. What guitar player is complete without a drummer? So I went out and bought a Korg Rhythm 55B, this old drum machine. And basically this is just a looping drum machine. So you can't create drum loops. It just comes with tons of pre-made loops, and you select your tempo and you can change through them. And it even had a cool foot switch that would allow me to do rhythm fills and start and stop with my feet, so I could play guitar, start the drum track, put in a fill. And I played with this thing until actually about 1.5 years ago, when I sold it to a friend. And it was hard for me to part with that piece of gear, but to be honest, I purchased so many drum machines since then that were clearly of a higher caliber, so I decided it was time to let go of that. But my initial setup was a Tascam 4-track recorder and this Korg Rhythm 55B drum machine and my guitar. I think I had a guitar from Sears at that point still. And that's what I made a lot of my music on in the beginning. And that's really what taught me how to write a song and lay down separate tracks. As I was gaining more experience as a musician, I also decided that I would like to start playing live. So, met a few friends through a job I had in a restaurant. One guy played guitar, another guy played drums, and we formed a 3-piece band. Only problem was there was 2 guitar players. So the deal we struck up between myself and the other guitar player, who also wanted to be a vocalist like I did, was that you would pick half the set. So we'd each pick 5 songs. Some of these were originals, some were covers. And if it was your selection, you got to play the guitar and sing, and the other guy would be the bass player and the backup vocalist. So throughout our set, we would swap back and forth between a bass and a guitar, and we had a drummer. Our band was called Geek, Geike, and we played a few shows together until our drummer disappeared. Ended up he went into rehab, so very rock and roll for my first band. And after that, I had a few different sort of jam bands that I was in with friends and stuff like that, but never really a solid band again. After that, I decided that it was too hard to try and adjust your schedule to match up with these guys. When's everybody ready? Are you good on Friday night to practice? And somebody wouldn't show up to the venue on time. So I just decided at that point, I was just gonna go out on my own, my drum machine, myself, my guitar, and it would just be easier. Also, as an only child, I was just accustomed to being alone a lot and sort of entertaining myself. So music lent itself to just doing that on my own, and now with a little bit of technology, a 4-track recorder and a drum machine, I really could kind of be my own band and do my own thing. Okay, so let's take a look over here at some of the studios that I've had throughout the years. I don't actually have any photos of my very original setup, which consisted of maybe 4 guitar pedals and my 4-track recorder and my little Korg drum machine. But as we go through these photos, you're going to see that the Korg drum machine's been there all along. The Tascam 4-track recorder was in for a long time. Really, the next major studio setup I had was when I lived on my own in Niagara Falls. At this point, it would have been in my late 20s, I guess. And I had a nice, tiny little apartment, but what I considered a really nice studio. So at this point, everything's being run through a mixing board. So I've got multiple things. I've got a keyboard at this point and several different instruments. It all runs into a mixing board. But that old school style way of making music meant that as I was playing all my music, it was all getting recorded down to one mix. So if I had the boys over on a Friday night to jam and play, that was great. But if our levels were a little off, the next day, there was nothing that could be done. If the bass was too loud, it was recorded in too loud. For myself personally, when I was doing multi-track recording, so I was laying down each track separately, it didn't matter because I was laying down a track and then a second track and a third track, and I could mix them afterwards. And this is really where I got my first bit of computer software. A friend of mine, Jeremy, at the time, introduced me to Cool Edit Pro. So I was using Cool Edit Pro for quite a long time, but it was good enough. It allowed me to record track by track and had a metronome, so I could actually learn to play on the rhythm, and then I could come in and set the drums down later. Often with that little Korg drum machine, I would lay out a drum track first. I used to lay out a rough guitar track, so I could go through and lay out the drum track and punch in the fills manually with the drum machine, and then come back and start to multi-track over that. That worked for a long time. And at that point, I even had a Pintec mesh head drum kit, like the modern electronic drum kits they have now. The Pintec ones are a bit cheaper, and it did sort of fall apart on me after a while. The mesh heads and sensors started to go, but that was a really great tool for me to learn basic drumming skills, which I still use to this day when I'm programming drums and things like that. But I kind of had everything. I had a bass, my guitar, keyboard, drums, and I was learning to use all these instruments a little bit. Certainly wasn't proficient, but that was a really solid setup I had, along with 4 cordless headphones that I had. So I could set up a mix and we could have 4 guys over. We could each have our headphones on because everything was electronic, including the drum kit. And I lived above a storefront in an apartment with other tenants around, so things had to be quiet. So on a Friday night, we could have a party and we could play music as loud as we wanted in our headphones, and we all had our own mix, and it worked really well. It never bothered anybody. Then moving forward, after that, I didn't really have my studio for a little while, and I moved up to the Burlington area in Ontario. And at that point, I had a really good job, so I had some extra money, and I bought myself a Pro Tools setup. So this had an 8-channel interface that went through FireWire back in the day. And problem with this was it was above my skill level, like my understanding. The advantage at that time of using a setup like Pro Tools was that I could record multiple instruments. So now we're moving past that problem I had with the mixer. I could record multiple instruments and they could all be laid out onto their own track. So I could jam with a couple of friends, we could record the mix, and then later I could go in and adjust the mix. And I also had the ability to change my effects on my guitar afterwards. So I could record a live effect in through the Pro Tools software. But in the end, I just couldn't get it to work because I didn't have a mentor at that time and I had no clue. It was such complicated software that I really just couldn't get the hang of it on my own, and I ended up selling that and my drum kit to a retired studio engineer building his own home studio. And after that, I just decided maybe the music thing is not for me for a little while. Okay, fast forward again a few years, and I'm now living in an apartment in Hamilton with my wife, Chris. And I suffered a very serious running injury. I'd snapped my plantar tendon, which left me unable to do any sports or activities for almost a year, and the guitar started to call to me again. So at this point in our apartment, I had no real space to set up a studio. So as you can see from the picture, I'm in the corner of a room, and I've still got my little Korg drum machine. I've got a Hughes and Kettner jazz amp that I'm using for my guitar, and I think I even ran a microphone into the rear input so that I could sing through it. But it was very basic setup, but it was enough for me to practice and play and get back into playing guitar again and sort of rekindle that love for making music. During that time, I also started to busk again, and I would go down to the art crawl street festivals they'd have here in Hamilton, and I'd set up on a corner and play and kind of get over that fear of playing in front of people, and that kind of kept me motivated through the week to learn a new cover or to pick up one of my older songs again and start playing it again. And again, I was really into music for a while. I think once I healed back up, I got seriously back into sports. I was racing triathlon just previous to my injury and doing a lot of running races. I got back into skateboarding, and I think, unfortunately, music just got shelved for a while again. Okay, leaping ahead to where we are now. So after another 3 or 4 year break from music, I would say, when we moved into the house, there was a big purge when we moved into this house. It was our first house, and during that move from the apartment here, we realized how much stuff we had that we didn't use. And unfortunately, a lot of my music equipment fell under that banner, and I just decided, I'm not going to get back into music. It's over for me, and I'm going to sell my gear. And that's what I did. I sold my Hughes and Kettner amp. I sold my guitar at the time, both my guitars, an acoustic electric and my Les Paul, my Epiphone Les Paul. I sold all of my guitars at that time. And within a week of selling everything, I realized it was the biggest mistake I had ever made in my whole life. Again, though, at this point, I'm running a successful dog training business. My wife's business is very successful. We have no kids, and we got a little bit extra of this kicking around. So I decided, now's the time. In my middle age, I have some money, I have the time, and I'm going to do some research and finally build my dream studio, at least within my means. So here we are, the current studio as of today, February 2023. And over the last 2.5 years, I have bought a ton of gear and sold a ton of gear, and also found out just how amazingly patient and understanding my wife Chris is, because she's allowed me to indulge in this passion. And for those of you that get into music, you already know this is not a cheap hobby. This can be a very pricey hobby depending on what you want to do. And as I had talked about earlier, I'm into all types of music. I like everything. Hip hop, dance, electronica, shoegaze, guitar, rock, metal. I love it all. And I really wanted to experiment with everything and learn how to make every genre. So the last 2 years was a deep dive into learning electronic music making, samplers, groove boxes, synthesizers, and I've had a number of these products. I had a Roland JU6A, which is the mini boutique version of the Juno. I had that, along with a Drum Brute Impact, and then the full Drum Brute, and I used that stuff to make a lot of music. I had a Volca new bass, which I used as my bassline generator for a while. So I made quite a bit of music just using that stuff in terms of electronic music. I've had a number of Korg Volcas over the years. I still own a few pocket operators. And then I started to see what I really wanted to use. The staples that came out of that are the SP404. So I've got the Mark II here, and in my little travel bag I've got the SP404A, and I've had an SP404SX. So I've had multiple different versions of the Roland SP404 sampler, which I still use to this day as one of the main instruments. I've had an MC707 group box and an MC101 group box, and I still have the MC101 group box, and I'll show you that when we get to the travel studio. I've got this Roland SPD6 drum pad, so practice pad, which I got a number of years ago when I first wanted to learn to play drums. So this came into my life before I had the Pintec kit and was part of my Pintec kit. So a lot of electronic music making, and now I've got a nice mix of electronic gear and standard guitar gear. So let's take a look at the studio as it is today. Well, you can see my dog's hanging out down here, and let's talk about the first instruments here, my guitars. We've got a Fender Jaguar Kurt Cobain custom model. This is my dream guitar, double humbuckers, and just a powerhouse of sound. I bought this last year and built this up. This is the Squier 3/4 size Stratocaster, and I removed the pickups, and it now has custom. Those are the Fender noiseless pickups, and I've replaced all the wiring. So essentially the pickups and the guts of that guitar are like pretty high end in a travel size. So that is the guitar I take when I travel. And then over here I've got my two acoustic guitars. So this little baby here, that's my Taylor GS Mini, which is my main day-to-day guitar. And this guy doesn't get enough love. It's a Norman ST40, and it's the full dreadnought size. Hard to see up here, but I did crack the headstock years ago, but it was repaired. This guy stays around because it was my original guitar. After my Sears guitar I had as a kid, this was the first acoustic that I ever owned as an adult, and it still stays with me and still gets played every now and then. All right, and here we are, the staple of the studio, the studio itself, where all the music gets produced, recorded, mixed, all of that good stuff. Even my laptop got an upgrade this year, and I'm now using a MSI gaming computer, and this thing has 32 gigs of RAM, which was crucial to making sure that my software ran smoothly. So it's been working great. I use Studio One, and that just ended up by default because I bought this Atom controller a while ago when I got into electronic music making. I still use the Atom controller all the time, but it's designed to be used with Studio One and came with Studio One. So by default, that's the new software that I fell into using as a DAW. So I use Studio One. I've got this Atom controller, which works great with their internal drum machine Impact, so I can actually use this just like I would my SP sampler and punch in live drums and things like that. My Roland SPD6 drum pad is connected down here to my looper pedal, which I'll show you in a minute. And really all I use this for is punching in live percussion when I'm doing live looping, like guitar looping. And then this becomes the drums that I can put into my loops. That's the only thing it's connected to at this point. This is my TC Helicon Create. This is my vocal pedal. So think of like a guitar effects pedal, but for your voice. So this does everything from delay and reverb and different sort of abilities to adjust the tone, sound, and effects on my vocals. Got this little guy 2 years ago because I wanted to learn how to DJ, and this is the Hercules Serato controller, and it's just basically a little tiny DJ controller, and I've actually done quite a few sets, and it's been fun learning how to use a actual DJ controller. So I even go that far into making electronic music. I can now mix and remaster my own songs on the fly. Down here I've got the SP404 Mark II. That's the newest version. I'll show you the older version when I show you the travel studio. More or less, I do some lo-fi songs on this. I tend to use my SP404 a lot as a sampler, and I'm currently in the process of setting up a music project where I'm going to create backing tracks for a lot of my original songs, and I'm going to put them on here to play live. Like, this is going to be my band. I've got this M Audio Oxygen Pro 49 key controller. It does come with all the pads, but I tend to use the Atom pad controller versus these pads, but they're there as well if I want to use them. I've got the HX Stomp over here, so this essentially is my guitar effects pedal, and everything is in here now. And then let me bring you over here so I can give you a better look. So right down here, this is the Keys Tone Exchanger pedal. And what this does is you can see there's a number of different pickups listed on here. Hot Texas, the P90 Soap Bar, and you can take whatever type of pickup you have, and then you can change and make it sound like any of these pickups. So if you've got one guitar like I do that has humbuckers, I could essentially come in here and change it so it sounds like any of these other pickups. So super handy if you're looking to get different guitar tones out of one single guitar. And I bought this before I had that little Strat, but I still use this all the time. And it can be the difference between, you know, keeping the same effects on your guitar, but just changing it from a rhythm sound to a lead sound. I can also use this as just a boost pedal sometimes if I need to just pump up the volume a little bit for a lead part. I use these PreSonus studio monitors in here. We've got a little statue of my man up here, Kurt Cobain, and he's hanging there with his the Boss pedal, the DS1 that he's known for using. And the way I set up my microphone here, just like this, microphone comes on out and I can use the mic, which is beautiful, and then folds away. I tend to play and practice standing up, so that works well for me. And as you can see, I even have a permanent camera mounted here in the studio so that when I'm playing some live sets, I can film at a moment's notice. I can just hit record. The plan is to start posting some more live sets and things like that. So nice to have a dedicated camera here in the studio. My headphones hang down here, and then underneath we've got the little Honeytone amp, which isn't hooked up to anything. It's just hanging out there now, but sometimes I take it when I travel. I've got this little Marshall 1 watt amp, which works just fine for me. I've got the Fishman, which also can run my vocals through it, so it's a great amp if I want to play live singer-songwriter kind of stuff, because it can handle a guitar. And a mic along with a third input in the back that I can plug a drum machine into. And then down here we keep things simple. This simply changes, it's just a switcher to change, do I want my guitar signal to the Fishman or to the Marshall? That's all that does, is change between these two amps. This foot switch down here actually handles all of the pedal changes for the HX Stomp. I've got my Boss RC500 looper here. And then all this pedal is, once it's plugged in, is this runs 2 additional functions. It runs start and stop, and it changes the rhythm pattern on the internal drums for the Boss. And of course, I've got my guitar throne, which doubles as my seat for the studio. All right, that's the main studio now as it stands. Not much else to say here. Let's check out my travel studio. My wife and I have a camper van that we like to travel in, and I actually keep a tinier version of this exact studio so that I can travel with it, and I'm never without my music making gear. Oh, I also forgot to mention, down here, I've got the Scarlett 18i8, so this is an 8 input audio interface. I also have the Scarlett 4i4 4 input, and we'll check that out. That has now been relegated to the travel studio. But I've tried to keep everything same between the two studios, and of course, without a good audio interface. What is a studio? But yeah, that's what I'm running. The Scarletts have pretty good sound to them. The preamps for the mics are nice, and find them pretty reliable and straightforward to use. Latency is next to nothing, and they've worked really well for me here. All right, the first thing we're going to go over is my SP404, which is now in my travel studio. So this was the original SP404 that I had, but when I purchased the Mark II, I decided to keep this one for a travel studio. And this is my little travel bag. So nice thing about this little bag, top opens up. I've got my batteries, some spare SD cards in here. I've got all the cables required to hook everything up. And then if we close up the top and open up the main level, when we open this up, there we go. There is the Roland 404A, and this comes on all my trips with me. It's loaded with a bunch of samples. It's got a bunch of different drum kits on here, so a lot of stuff that's nice to use. Plus, if I have it, I've got the external power here. So typically I use batteries when I'm traveling, but if I'm somewhere that has some power for the camper van, I can plug this in, get as much power as I need, and then it closes right up into this nice little carrying bag. Okay, up next is the main travel studio itself. So keep in mind I do bring the laptop with me. So the laptop is part of the studio setup when I'm on the road, but here are the guts. So in the top, all we've got are some spare cables in here. Nothing to see here, folks. Move along. Then if I zip open this compartment here, I've got my microphone with my custom elastic band windscreen. I've got a battery charger here, and you'll see why. And then in this little pouch are all the bits and pieces, odds and ends. There are some spare batteries, there are cables, there are adapters, and all those other little nooks and crannies needed. So once we zip that up, we get into the main compartment now. So we open this up, and right at the top is the M-Audio Oxygen Pro Mini. So the mini version of the 49 key that I have in the main studio. So nothing more to go over here. Basically, both of the M-Audio units are just MIDI controllers. I actually can control the volume sliders inside the DAW. I can control pan. I've got some pads here, and on the road I do not have, I don't bring the Atom pad controller, so then I actually do use these to punch in drums, and I've got a keyboard here along with all my transport buttons. That's the Oxygen Pro Mini. Under here, I've got my traveling headphones. We've got a number of different cables, so imagine anything we need to hook up. I've got a real tiny little mini set up here as a mic stand, so that can set up and hold the mic for recording. Nice and handy to have. And then under here on one side, so I've readjusted these dividers to actually protect the equipment. So here we go. Here is the MC101 groove box. So that comes with me everywhere. And basically in this groove box contains a whole variety of synthesizers, virtual instruments from pianos to brass to woodwinds, and of course all of the famous Roland drum kits, the 808, the 909, you name it. So a lot of stuff gets created on this little guy here, and because it is battery powered, when I'm traveling, I can go and sit on the beach or at a picnic table in a park. I can hang out in the sunshine and just create music without having to set up the entire studio. And then under this side is my original interface that I had. So the Focusrite, this is the 4i4, 2 inputs in the front, 2 more inputs and some outputs in the back with MIDI. And this is what I'm using to connect my laptop and all of my equipment when I'm on the road. And that just sits under there as well. And that's USB powered exclusively, so I don't need any external power. One of the key things that I wanted out of my travel studio was nothing needed outside power. So the laptop can run on batteries for up to 6 hours. The audio interface is powered from the laptop. The MC101 is powered through batteries, and of course the M-Audio controller also USB powered through the laptop. And last but not least, of course, as a guitar player, I want to travel with my guitar, or at least one of them. And all that's in here now is I've taken the little 3/4 Fender Strat off the wall, and you can see it's hanging out inside here, so it fits perfectly. And this entire case here actually fits in one of the cabinets in our camper van. Super convenient, but it still houses a few more secrets. Let's take a look. So in the top pouch here, when we unzip, We've got another set of headphones because I don't always bring everything in the studio. On a short trip, I might just want to bring my guitar and be able to play. So we've got a set of Sony headphones. I've got two of these little headphone amps. So basically these plug into the guitar. You plug your headphone into here and then you get a number of different guitar effects from distortion and chorus and all those things. I've got the Vox, the old Vox Classic here, so both of these work the same. And the nice thing about both of these is they have an additional auxiliary input, and that is what I use for this little guy here. So this is the Korg KR Mini rhythm machine, and this is like a smaller, more modern version of the Rhythm 55B I used to have. So think again, this is just a number of preset rhythms in here. I can select from rock to metal to pop. I get a tempo knob, and then I get some different variations on patterns, and I can also do a fill. In a pinch, this thing can actually be set up so that it just contains the drum sounds, and you can actually tap out the drum sounds manually if you want. But I would imagine at this point I would just use the software in Studio One if I was creating a drum loop that way. But my little practice drum machine, and of course a few various cables that come along with me, and that's my little tuner. So everything fits nicely into this bag for traveling, and then wherever I go, I've always got all of my studio gear here. And then this little guy just zips back up, and away we go. All right, that's it for my studio tour. And I think at this point, I know people are always saying, that's it, that's all I'm gonna get. But I think at this point, the only thing I could see adding to the studio at any point would be virtual instruments. I mean, I have the guitars that I want, and as a guitar player, that's all I need in terms of actual instruments. I've certainly got a piano or any other type of keyboard-based instrument I want just through all the selection of virtual instruments that come in the software nowadays. I've got samplers, I've got drum machines, I've got everything I need. And now it's time to start creating more music. I do have a Bandcamp, and I've actually produced a ton of music on the Bandcamp, and it's certainly been more of quantity over quality, let's say, for the last little while. Piece of advice that was given to me a long time ago when you're learning to make music was just make lots of music. Doesn't matter how good it is. And I followed that advice, and I produced about 5 or 6 albums of just random music as I've been learning to make electronic and hip hop. Lots of different genres mixed in there. I've still got 2 original albums that I recorded with just my vocals and a guitar. That's really sort of the world that I came from, was just a singer-songwriter on a guitar. I've expanded to more knowledge of electronic-based stuff, and now it's time to put all of this together into some sort of amalgamated musical style. Electro-acoustic rock? Who knows? Anyway, that's it. That's my studio as it stands here now in 2023. And I can't see any changes, as I said, going forward, because I've got everything I need. It's time to just make some awesome music. And I'll leave you with some clips of the travel studio in action down in Florida on a recent trip that my wife Chris and I just took. And it was great. I got to make lots of music. I spent at least an hour or so every day, I would say, trying to make music. And there were times where we were just sitting around at the campground, and I'd be out there all day in the sunshine on the picnic table with my little travel studio, just making music. It was great. So travel studio, virtually just a smaller version of my main studio, so nothing new to try and remember and relearn when I get on a trip. I'm still using the same equipment, just smaller versions of it that travel better, and it works great. All right, thanks for joining me for this tour, and I hope to be sharing a lot more music in the future instead of just tours of where I make the music. See you later.